Hello, my beautiful people. Have I got a wild update for you today? So buckle up, Buttercup, because what I'm about to tell you is crazy. And I know you're going to love it because it involves one of our very favorite people, Dr. Zahi Hawass.
My book.
Huge credit on this one goes to Jimmy Corsetti over at Bright Insight, who broke this story wide open this week over on X. His video is what kicked me into looking at all of this, and we'll link it in the description below. Go watch that one as soon as you're done watching this one. So, the Osiris Shaft. If you've never heard of the place, you're not alone. It sits underneath the causeway of the Khafre Pyramid at Giza. The only way in is a locked, unmarked gate, and the public doesn't get to see it without going through a very expensive permitting process. 3 vertical shafts cut straight into bedrock stacked on top of each other. By the time you get to the bottom, you're about 98 feet underground. The air is bad, and you're standing at the edge of a flooded chamber with an island in the middle. On that island, 2 massive stone sarcophagi. The little one on the bigger one weighs about 12 tons. That name, the Osiris Shaft, was given to it by Zahi Hawass himself, who excavated it down to the lowest level in 1999. And the reason he called it that is the layout, an island tomb encircled by water, matches a description written down 2,500 years ago by the Greek historian Herodotus. For centuries, scholars assumed Herodotus made it up. Then Hawass pumped out the water in 1999, and lo and behold, there it was. Fast forward to last Friday, May 15th, 2026. Piers Morgan hosts a debate between Hawass and Jimmy Corsetti. And this time, Jimmy comes in with a very specific question. What happened to whatever was inside the sarcophagus at the bottom of the Osiris Shaft? Because back in 1999, Hawass was on a Fox special teasing the discovery, talking about the tomb of the god Osiris, talking about a sarcophagus they just opened. And then for 26 years, nothing. No press conference, no artifact on display in the Cairo Museum that anyone can point to. Just radio silence. So Jimmy asks his question, and Hawass answers it. He says,
When I opened the sarcophagus, it was completely empty.
He goes on to explain that the whole thing was symbolic, that Osiris is a myth, that there was never anything in there to begin with. And then he says this.
This is the first time I hear about a mummy found in this sarcophagus.
Completely empty. First time hearing about it on national television from the man who personally led the excavation. Okay, got it. However, after that show, Jimmy did what most people watching that interview didn't do. He did a little digging and found a specific academic paper. It's called The Discovery of the Osiris Shaft at Giza. Author, Zahi A. Hawass, Supreme Council of Antiquities. Published in 2007, hosted to this day on Harvard's Giza Archives. And on page 390 of that publication, in plain academic English, the paper says, quote, the remains of a skeleton were discovered in the sarcophagus. End quote. So, not empty. It had a skeleton, plus 2 schist amulets in the shape of Osiris, plus heart scarabs, plus jed pillar amulets, plus red polished pottery. All of it documented, measured, and published under his own name. So, which Zahi Hawass do we believe? The one in the 2007 academic paper who cataloged a skeleton and a small museum's worth of grave goods? Or the one on Piers Morgan last week who said the box was empty and that this was the first time he's even hearing about a body? They can't both be true. Now, I want to be careful here because Jimmy's video is already racking up hundreds of thousands of views, and the comments are running in a direction that I'm sure you can guess. But let's give Hawass the most generous read possible. There's a real linguistic distinction between a mummy and a skeleton. A mummy is preserved soft tissue, bandages, embalming, the whole production. Skeleton is just bones. So when Hawass said no mummy, technically he could be drawing that line. That argument works for about 10 seconds because he didn't just say no mummy. He said the sarcophagus was completely empty. The skeleton isn't empty. The skeleton with amulets and scarabs around it is really, really not empty. The simpler explanation, in my humble opinion, is that maybe the skeleton was properly cataloged back in 1999, moved to storage, and Hawass on TV just kind of running his mouth, speaking in broad symbolic sense. That happens. People oversimplify on television all the time. Of course, after what we're about to talk about, you may find that explanation a little harder to swallow. Because here's the question that explanation doesn't answer. Where's the skeleton right now? Where are the amulets? Where are the scarabs? Where's the red polished pottery? Where are the 4 engraved pillars that flank that chamber? Because if everything was properly handled, somebody somewhere can point to a museum case and a catalog number and put this to rest in about 10 minutes. But so far, nobody has. Now, I love Jimmy's work. We did a whole video a while back on the lost city of Atlantis and the mountain of evidence pointing to the reshot structure in the Sahara as its real location. Jimmy's work was part of what got us interested. We went really deep on that one, pulling in research from a bunch of other sources in addition to Jimmy to really cover it thoroughly. So I'll drop a link to that one in the description. If this video is your first taste of this kind of story, that one will absolutely scratch the itch. But anyway, back to Jimmy. The legwork he did finding that 1999 Fox TV special and pulling that 2007 paper is journalism that nobody else was doing. Jimmy floats the idea that the Osiris Shaft might actually be the lost tomb of Kufu, the pharaoh who supposedly built the Great Pyramid. And his reasoning is that Herodotus described an underground tomb encircled by water and said it was the resting place of Cheops, which is the Greek name for Kufu. Here's where, on the surface, the dating seems to create a problem. According to the official record, Kufu reigned in the 4th dynasty, roughly 2589 to 2566 BC, about 4,600 years ago. But the sarcophagus, the amulets, the scarabs, all those artifacts in the lower chamber are dated stylistically to the 26th dynasty, roughly 664 to 525 BC. That's a gap of close to 2,000 years. So at first glance, this looks like a slam dunk against the Kufu theory. Except, stop and ask yourself a question. Who dated those artifacts? Who examined them? Who published the paper that's the only academic source on what was found down there? The same man who just told Piers Morgan the box was empty. The same man whose own paper he was contradicting on national television. The same man with a documented history of antiquities accusations. We don't have an independent team that has examined these artifacts. We have one man's word, and that's the same man whose word we just spent 10 minutes establishing we can't take at face value. So the dating that supposedly rules out Kufu is only as reliable as the man who reported it. And right now, that's not very reliable at all. But let's get back to our friend Zahi, because we're not done with him yet. Did you know that in 2011 he was forced out of his position as Egypt's Minister of Antiquities? The Smithsonian wrote a long piece on it in 2013. According to that reporting, the prosecutor general banned him from leaving Egypt while he was being investigated on dozens of charges. He was accused of wasting public money and exposing Egyptian antiquities to possible theft by shipping them overseas without permission. The Guardian ran a follow-up in 2014 when he was accused of helping German hobbyists steal samples from the Great Pyramid. Of course, he denied it, and he was never convicted of anything. And obviously, that little legal hiccup didn't bother him because he came back. He's back on Piers Morgan. He's back on Joe Rogan. He's back on the tour circuit. And just to put the stakes in perspective, a 2011 estimate put the Egyptian antiquities black market at somewhere between $2 and $6 billion per year, with a B. So we're not talking about hobbyist collectors. We're talking about an industry with the financial firepower to make almost anything disappear. Am I accusing him of looting the Osiris Shaft? Nope. I have no evidence of that, and neither does Jimmy. What I am saying is when the public record on someone includes formal accusations of facilitating antiquities theft, and that same person publicly contradicts his own published findings about what was inside a sarcophagus, the question of where the contents actually went stops being a conspiracy theory and starts being a reasonable thing to ask. However, here's where I have to say something Jimmy didn't quite say out loud on Piers Morgan, but I think is the real heart of this story. Zahi Hawass isn't a neutral observer. He's built his entire career on a very specific narrative, that the dynastic Egyptians built the pyramids, that they're the direct ancestors of modern Egyptians, and that anyone suggesting otherwise, whether it's an alternative history researcher, Afrocentrist scholars, or genetic researchers asking inconvenient questions, is a fringe crank not worth taking seriously. For roughly 2 decades, he personally controlled who got to dig in Egypt, who got to test the mummies, and who got published. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's the public record of how the Supreme Council of Antiquities operated under his leadership. Now, think about what would happen if the lowest chamber of the Osiris Shaft actually contained something that didn't fit that story. What if it was Kufu? What if Herodotus was right all along? Because if Kufu was buried down in that shaft, then he wasn't buried in the Great Pyramid. And if he wasn't buried in the Great Pyramid, then the Great Pyramid wasn't his tomb. And if it wasn't his tomb, then the entire foundation of mainstream Egyptology, that the dynastic Egyptians built the pyramids as tombs for their pharaohs about 4,600 years ago, starts to wobble.
Bulls wobble, but they don't fall down.
The Great Pyramid becomes something else. Maybe something older. Maybe something built for a different purpose. Maybe something built by somebody else entirely. We don't know. But every one of those possibilities is a career-ending earthquake for the man who has spent his whole life defending that standard story. If anything down in that chamber pointed in any of those directions, the man with the most powerful motive on planet Earth to make it disappear would be the exact same man who led the excavation, controlled the chain of custody, and just told Piers Morgan the box was empty. That doesn't prove he did anything wrong. I want to be clear about that. But in any other field, when a witness has a documented motive to lie about a specific topic, you weigh their testimony on that topic with extra skepticism. That's how courtrooms work. That's how journalism works. That's how science is supposed to work. And it's the standard Hawass's own testimony should be held to right here. So, here's my 2 cents. The questions that deserve answers are simple. Where are the skeletal remains right now? What institution holds them? What's the catalog number? Where are the amulets, the scarabs, the 4 engraved pillars? And why did you tell Piers Morgan the box was empty when your own paper says it wasn't? And why, in 26 years, has no independent team been allowed to verify what's actually in storage? That's it. That's the whole ask. If there are good answers, great. Let's hear them. Let's see the storage facility. Let's see the museum case. And if there aren't good answers, well, then we have a problem. Because we're talking about the lowest chamber of a structure that matches a 2,500-year-old description by Herodotus sitting underneath the Giza Plateau in the country that's produced more looted antiquities in the last 2 centuries than possibly anywhere else on Earth. Go watch Jimmy's video. The link is in the description. He goes deeper into the receipts than I can in a 10-minute reaction, and the man earned every view that video is going to get. He's doing the work nobody else is doing right now. So, I hope you guys found this little tidbit of archaeological soap opera drama worth the watch. And if we actually get any answers, I'll let you know. You guys are the best. I love you all. Thank you for being here and supporting us. And a special shout out to our members who saw this one first. Membership gets you early access to stories like this one, plus members-only content outside our regular weekly videos. Links in the description if you want in. The question that, and the man earned geological soap opera. Be careful out there, and I'll see you soon. Be careful out there, and I will see you here again on the In-Between.